Since I have seen alliances at work, I have lost something of my admiration for Napoleon. General Maurice Sarret, French Army, in a conversation to French Premier Georges Clemenceau, spring 1918. Hey folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to my man Koen, a listener who I met when I was in Ypres just a couple of weeks ago. While I was hanging out at Les Halles in Ypres, Koen came over to say hi. And honestly, how cool is that? It was awesome to meet you, man, and I hope we can do so again in the future. Okay, so now let's see if I can use some cheesy and cliche business language for the following little piece of admin notes. Also, while in Ypres, I met up with Roger Stewart of Ypres Battlefield Tours and the new Ypres League. We talked for a bit, and we have decided that I will be the public-facing interface for new Ypres League's North American operations. How was that? Okay, here's what it is, folks. For those of you on the North American continent, if you decide to join the new Ypres League, I'll be the guy sending you a little welcome packet in the mail. And here's why you should consider joining up. What is the new Ypres League? Well, from the registered charities website, the new Ypres League is an Ypres-based charity dedicated to remembering the fallen of all sides in the Ypres salient during the Great War of 1914 to 1918. The aims of the new Ypres League are very straightforward and are based on the core values of the original Ypres League. Here are just a few of them. To continue our commitment and obligation to the fallen by commemorating all soldiers who lost their lives in the Ypres salient during the Great War, by attending burial, rededication, and memorial services with a standard bearer and a wreath layer. To restore the historic relationship between the Ypres League and St. George's Memorial Church. To introduce a program of information boards relevant to the Ypres League at relevant sites, starting with Hellfire Corner. To build relationships with the city of Ypres, its surrounding towns, and all our fellow remembrance organizations in the area, and to promote the ideal of peace and reconciliation. And last but not least, to develop a youth section so the important work of remembrance can be carried forward by the next generation. If this is something that interests you, please consider joining the New Ypres League at newypresleague.com. There is a link in the show notes as well. All right, let's go ahead and let's get into our episode. So in this standalone episode, we're going up over the battlefields and the fronts to take a 10,000 meter, or 30,000 foot, view of the Great War, specifically prosecuting that war through the framework of coalition warfare. We're going to take a look at the challenges of command within a warfighting coalition. This episode is an adaptation of a term paper written for a recent class, and I hope you'll find it interesting. Of course, all I did was scratch the surface on the topic, and a whole book could be written on it. And whole books have already. Articles, too. In fact, if you read only one book on this topic, you would not go wrong reading Dr. Elizabeth Greenhalgh's Victory Through Coalition, Britain and France During the First World War. There will be several articles mentioned in this episode. These articles are mostly published in academic journals, and so if you want to dig deeper, you may need access to a database through a university or the like. Okay, here we go. The challenges faced by commanders in coalition warfare are that of alliance cohesion and exercising unified command. During the First World War, both the Central Powers and Triple Entente built coalitions to prosecute the conflict towards their war aims, although with starkly different levels of success. Focusing on the Central Powers and the Allies during the First World War, how successfully the commanders of these two coalitions faced these challenges will be the focus of this essay. As stated in Dr. Kelly Grieco's article titled Fighting and Learning in the Great War, 4 Lessons in Coalition Warfare. Coalition warfare can be described as military political alliances between states or other actors in wartime that can engage in common goals and strategies, and then act decisively to defeat the adversary using those strategies. Successful coalitions will have cohesion, which is defined as the ability of states to agree on goals and strategies toward attaining those goals. Per the article, Alliance Cohesion and Coalition Warfare, the Central Powers and Triple Entente, by Professor Patricia Weitzman. To achieve a winning coalition, Dr. Grieco posits that actors within the wartime alliance must learn and then execute the following lessons: that professional contacts and personal relationships made in peacetime are essential to working relationships in wartime, that alliances need institutional machinery for political military planning, that coalition warfare will promote flexibility through adaptation and innovation, and that unity of command is essential. Unity of command, or unified leadership, will be the commander that executes the common strategy. This is the leader who will have the combined forces and resources of the alliance states and actors under their authority, and will have to provide the essential purpose, direction, and motivation in order for those subordinate formations to succeed. This episode will show that the Central Powers failed to achieve alliance cohesion and unified command during the Great War, while the Allies managed to achieve cohesion and resource consolidation under unified command during the German offensives in spring 1918. It will begin by setting the stage with a cursory exposition of the Central and Allied powers' war aims and attendant strategies. We will then explore how each opposing alliance executed those war aims between 1914 and 1918, while referencing alliance cohesion and Grieco's lessons of coalition warfare. In the case of the principal states of the Central Powers, Imperial Germany and the Empire of Austria-Hungary, Holger Herwig posits in his book The First World War, Germany and Austria-Hungary, 1914 through 1918, that both knew that any future conflict in Europe would be a two-front war. Germany would launch its vaunted Schlieffen Plan against the age-old enemy, France, quickly shattering it and then shuttling its military might to the east to defeat the Russian Bear. The dual monarchy of the Habsburgs would be attacking Serbia to permanently settle that Balkan rivalry, while also setting its forces against the legions of Imperial Russia. The threat of a united, nationalist, and militaristic Imperial Germany united the principal powers of the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Great Britain. Any European conflict that involved France would also involve Germany, and France intended revenge for its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871. Accordingly, the French Army's Plan 17 sought to launch a headlong thrust into the lost provinces of Alsace and Lorraine, retaking those while defeating German forces in the field. Imperial Russia would assist France by releasing its own invasion of East Prussia under Plan 19's Schedule G, thus squeezing Germany from both sides. Russia also had a Schedule A for its Plan 19 to deal with Austria-Hungary should that be the more immediate threat. Great Britain largely remained out of continental affairs, but affirmed its determination to defend Belgian neutrality. That the chiefs of staff of the German and Austro-Hungarian armies, Helmuth von Moltke and Konrad von Hötzendorf, respectively, both agreed on the likelihood of a future two-front war was a woefully inadequate base on which to build a cohesive alliance. Despite having entered into a formal alliance in 1879, Germany and Austria-Hungary engaged in little joint planning for war. This was not due to missing interpersonal contacts and relationship building between the two armies. Admittedly, during Alfred von Schlieffen's tenure as Chief of Staff of the German Army in the 1890s, relations with the Austro-Hungarians sank. According to an article by Holger Herwig titled Disjointed Allies, Coalition Warfare in Berlin and Vienna, 1914, von Schlieffen doubted the military abilities of the Habsburgs, and as a result, he shared nothing with them regarding the war plan that bears his name. These conditions were ameliorated when Helmut von Moltke succeeded von Schlieffen, but while von Moltke and von Hötzendorf exchanged ideas more often, neither was ever honest with each other, with both heads of their respective general staffs dancing a polite polonaise around the vital issue of joint military planning. Neither army properly assessed the other's capabilities or plans, and both von Moltke and von Hötzendorf operated under the assumption that the other would attack Russia first so they themselves could attack their respective main enemy, France, in Germany's case, and Serbia for the Habsburg dual monarchy. Both states went to war in 1914 without a systematically developed war plan for each other. While the institutional machinery for joint planning existed, neither the Germans nor their Austro-Hungarian allies ever hammered out a common war goal nor strategy to support such a goal. Germany attacked France without realizing the Habsburg army would be attacking Serbia first, then Russia. The Austro-Hungarians attacked Serbia without realizing that the Germans would remain on the defensive in the east until France was defeated, and the Germans had never provided any time frame in which they would shuttle their forces east to deal with Russia. The Belgians, French, British, and Russians, each as an opponent who acts and reacts on his own, per Robert Doughty's book, Pyrrhic Victory, French Strategy and Operations in the Great War, shattered Germany's plans in the west and Austria-Hungary's in the east. In the west, Belgian forces fought more doggedly than expected, and French forces, with the British Expeditionary Force, rallied after weeks of retreat to deliver a stunning counterblow at the Marne. In the Balkans, the Austro-Hungarian army attacked Serbian forces and were rebuffed. In the east, the Russian steamroller rolled right over half-prepared Austro-Hungarian armies with hundreds of thousands of irreplaceable Habsburg's troops lost. Attempts at adaptation fell short and did not bring the Central Powers coalition closer together. The adaptation came in for Germany as they repeatedly had to adapt to ground reality and step in to assist their weaker Austro-Hungarian ally in the field. In these cases, the Central Powers actually saw success when their armies worked together at Gorlice Tarnov in 1915, in Serbia and Montenegro that same year, with assistance from the new Central Powers ally, Bulgaria, and at Caporetto on the Italian front in 1917. Yet, the occupation of much of Russian Poland, Serbia, Montenegro, and parts of Albania led to arguments over who would get power and influence over those lands, according to the article, The Austro-Hungarian Experience of Coalition Warfare, 1914 through 1918, by Günter Kronenbitter. Innovation also proved unable to bring cohesion to the alliance. The setbacks and defeats of 1914 starkly demonstrated a need for coming together to define common goals and strategy for victory. Yet everything that followed from that time until spring of 1918 was half measures. Austria-Hungary only grew weaker as the war went on, yet national pride and interests kept the Habsburgs from submitting to a coalition of combined resources, much less unified command. When the Germans proposed their Mitteleuropa customs union plan with Germany as a principal power, their Austro-Hungarian leadership remained steadfastly opposed to it. Joint conferences on the battlefield enabled some of the above-noted battlefield successes, but these were temporary solutions to immediate problems. Mutual conferences and arrangements were the substitute for comprehensive unity. German General Hermann von Kuhl argued in a 1923 Foreign Affairs article titled Unity of Command Among the Central Powers. Unified command of the Central Powers under German leadership came too late to save the alliance in 1918. Emperor Franz Joseph had repeatedly refused to allow the Habsburg army to be part of a joint command while he reigned. Austria-Hungary only grew weaker as the war went on, yet national pride and interest kept the Habsburgs from submitting to a unified command. Von Hötzendorf also pushed back against unified command, fearing loss of Austrian prestige. When the joint Supreme Command was created in the war's last year, the two alliance partners epitomized their stances. Austria-Hungary refused to be second place in the alliance, and the Germans rejected the idea of a Habsburg general in charge of German forces. Austro-Hungarian forces remained in Italy, Russia having bowed out of the war in 1917, while Germany remained focused on the Western Front. Far from unified command, Germany and Austria-Hungary fought two separate wars alongside each other. Far from reaching alliance cohesion and a unified approach to fighting and winning the First World War, both states eventually capitulated. The alliance of the Triple Entente, or Allies, during the Great War is a different tale. The Allies had the benefit of German aggression as the motivating agent to fold them into a cohesive alliance. While each of the Allies had their own goals and war aims, all could agree on the goal that Germany needed to be defeated. German forces also needed to be expelled from Belgium, France, Serbia, Montenegro, Romania, and Russia. The Anglo-French Entente in 1904, along with its inclusion of Russia in 1907, provided two important conditions that facilitated a cohesive alliance amongst the Allies. Dr. Elizabeth Greenhalgh states in her book Victory Through Coalition that first, it helped paper over centuries of hatred between two of Europe's most bitter enemies, France and England. Second, it allowed for the beginning and building of professional and interpersonal relationships between the staffs of the French and British armies through periodic meetings. These meetings fell far short of developing cohesion between the two prospective powers. French and British officers debated ports and logistics hubs for usage by a future British expeditionary force. but never came close to achieving a common goal or strategy in the event of war with Germany. British commanders deployed to France in 1914, still unsure of where in the front line they would be positioned. Still, bonds were forged during this time. During the pre-war years, Germany made several diplomatic attempts to divide the nascent Allies, but British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey claimed these attempts actually brought the French and British closer together. The war brought about necessary innovation and adaptation through institutional planning and the creation of institutions to assist the machinery and sinews of the Great War. As the language barrier was an issue of no small concern, liaison officers were dispatched between the two armies to obtain understanding and mutual confidence, as British liaison officer Edward Spears stated. Officers like Lieutenant Spears and those of the Mission Militaire Française were not part of their allies' headquarters simply to translate orders and help convene meetings. Spears wrote that the primary task of a liaison officer was that of interpreting commanders to each other. This points to a much deeper understanding of the role of the liaison. These bilingual go-betweens needed to have an intimate connection with the staff to which they were attached and to fully grasp the scope of operations and plans created amongst those staffs. Liaisons also needed to have a solid grasp of their commander's intent. The Allies lacked a cohesive strategy during the first 2 years of the war, to the point that the British Prime Minister David Lloyd George would later write, "There were at least 6 separate and distinct wars, with a separate, distinct, and independent strategy for each." Better coordination of efforts between all of the Allied forces was desperately needed, particularly in the abattoir of the trench-deadlocked Western Front. The upper echelons of the participating military and political commands met at conferences in Calais, France, in July of 1915, and at Chantilly, France, in December 1915, to develop and coordinate a common strategy. These innovations provided the needed military political institutions for planning a winning strategy. The results of these meetings were not perfect, but they improved over time as Allied cohesion grew. The December 1915 Chantilly Conference produced the 1916 Battle of the Somme, which can be described as 2 battles fought side by side on the Somme against the Germans. While the French and British were attacking at the junction point of their armies on the Western Front, there was a significant lack of joint planning and agreement on exploiting the intended breakout. The new BEF commander, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, sought to act as independently on the battlefield as he could. However, liaison between French and BEF corps commands improved. Further innovation was seen in the sharing and cross-leveling of lessons learned on the battlefield. BEF tactical leaders sought to learn the new infantry tactics the French army had developed at Verdun. Innovation and adaptation deepened as the Allies began to pool their resources together, something the Central Powers remained unable to do. The British government tapped into its vast financial resources to assist both the French and Russians with weapons, coal, and other supplies. British inspectors worked to improve efficiency on French railroads and ports. While this caused the French no small amount of annoyance, outside eyes on transportation policies and procedures did bring about improvements. After the American entry into the war, Britain leveraged use of its transport ships to bring the rapidly expanding American Expeditionary Force over the Atlantic and at least some American infantry divisions under British command. The key to Allied success came during the crisis in March 1918, when after a series of devastating German offensives on the Western Front, the Triple Entente unified under the command of Field Marshal Ferdinand Foch. He was at first given the role of a supreme coordinator, where he immediately went to work to keep the French and British armies in contact and to hold the city of Amiens. A little over 1 week later, Foch saw his authority increased to strategic direction of all military operations, with all powers necessary to secure its effective realization. Marshal Foch faced leadership challenges despite the sweeping power given him by the Allied Supreme War Council. Both Haig of the BEF and General Philippe Pétain, commanding the French army, sought to retain control of their reserves. For Foch to execute his mandate properly, he would have to have control of the release and deployment of reserve forces. Furthermore, Foch could hardly tell King Albert of the Belgians what to do, and the newly arrived Americans strongly and even vehemently opposed the proposed amalgamation of their troops into the French and British armies. Rather than clumsily wielding the authority of his rank and position, Foch sought to use influence to get those commanders to do what needed to be done. He called on personal diplomacy, tact, and energetic exhortation, and was flexible enough in his thinking to be able to allow Haig's and American General John Pershing's ideas to be heard and implemented. While he was a Frenchman, he kept in his mind a view of the entirety of the Western Front. This focus on the entire front was essential in maintaining the cohesion of the Allied forces, as all attacks and counterattacks were applied to the whole of the ever-developing battlefield conditions. I am the leader of the orchestra. Here are the English bassos. Here, the American baritones, and there, the French tenors. When I raise my baton, every man must play, or else he must not come to my concert, Foch said later. Foch's comparison of his command of Allied forces to that of an orchestra conductor is an apt one, and helps demonstrate the challenges of executing a coalition war. In his command role, Foch served as the coordinator of the multiple players within the deadly symphony that was the Allied forces in the Great War. Yet he was dependent upon them each playing their part as agreed. As the commander of these coalition forces, Foch had to carefully and delicately wave his conductor's wand, knowing when to initiate one army's attack and when to ask for more from another national force. All of this involved a keen and intuitive mind, an ear for when flexibility was needed in convincing an ally to do what needed to be done, and when to hold the line and starkly call for tout le monde à la bataille. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. It's a little higher than trench level, but I wanted to share some of the exciting topics I've been studying this past year. This is being recorded in August 2024, so we just wrapped up our Meuse-Argonne battle study last month. This is not a sales ploy, but the 2025 tour and battle study is already halfway sold out. We are incredibly grateful for that, and we are looking forward to expanding our travels a bit next summer to keep providing something unique that you can't get anywhere else. Next year, we will offer our standard Meuse-Argonne battlefield walks, but we are looking to go to the Vel and spend some time in the Theme area. If this sounds interesting to you and you want in for next summer, please send an email to lostbattaliontours@gmail.com and we'll get the conversation started. We'd love for you to join us. Questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to contact me at verdunpodcast@gmail.com. Get at me on Twitter at WW1podcast. Check out the BFWWP website, firstworldwarpodcast.com, for photos and entries, and check out the Battles of the First World War podcast page on the Facebook. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to you again soon. Take care.